Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Politics, reaching you live from our global headquarters here in the nation's commercial nerve center, Lagos. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. Coming up on the program, federal government doubles down, insisting it won't pay ransom to terrorists, directs military to ensure the rescue of all kidnapped victims in Kaduna, Sokoto, Borno, and other states of the Federation. Speaker of the House of Representatives announces plan by the lawmakers to hold a legislative security summit to find lasting solution to Nigeria's festering insecurity. Medicine Sans Frontier, also known as Doctors Without Borders, raised alarm over the growing and dangerous humanitarian crisis bedeviling the Northwest following the insecurity in the region. Thank you again for joining us on the program. Let's begin the tracking of the polity with a message from the federal government to the bandits, demanding money as ransom for those they've kidnapped in Sokoto, Kaduna, Borno, and other states. The government is unequivocal. It won't pay a dime as ransom. That's coming from the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mr. Mohammed Idris, who restated the government's stance. Speaking after the Federal Executive Council meeting at the Presidential Villa, Abuja, he maintained that the President, Bola Tinubu, has reiterated his directive to the military to ensure that the victims are rescued and brought back safely to their homes.
It's the third federal executive meeting of the year, and it starts with the swearing in of the new commissioners of the National Population Commission. President Bola Tinubu is presiding over the ceremony as the commissioners step forward in batches for the exercise.
Do solemnly swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So help me God.
After the ceremony, the council meeting moves into a closed-door session. A recent spate of abductions in the northern part of the country features during the meeting.
We are seeing some kind of movement by the more the security agencies are also hitting these targets, the targets of criminals, the more they are pushed to also getting some soft targets. But government is not taking any excuses. The president has directed that security agencies must, as a matter of urgency, ensure that these children and all those who have been kidnapped are brought back in safety, and government is not paying anybody any dime. And the government is optimistic that these children and other people that are abducted will be brought back to their families in safety.
The Minister of Agriculture gave an update on the federal government's distribution of grains across the country.
We're distributing to state capitals in the first instance now. As you all are aware, the risks involved in vandalization of foodstuff in transit. So we're working assiduously with the Office of the National Security Advisor and the DSS and the police. And as I can assure you, we have started distributing, especially in the Northwest, with northwestern states. We're distributing out of 7 points.
Council also approved the setting up of a $2 billion fund for a 120-kilometer fiber optic cable across the country.
The president is giving the go-ahead for us to source funds for that. So we are in the process of setting up a $2 billion fund. I said it costs less than $1 billion. But the reason why we're setting up a $2 billion fund is to use the balance to drive down the cost of connectivity in the country. We want to ensure that all schools are connected, all hospitals in the country that they are connected, and also all government facilities as well.
The Minister of Works also addressed concerns that his push for companies to build concrete roads could be responsible for the rising cost of cement.
The policy has not even taken off, very well, because you should ask yourself how many roads today are being done on concrete. But the truth remains that with the cost of bitumen now, contractors are begging that their projects should be reviewed on concrete.
State House correspondents were also informed that the president is not stopping or suspending the student loan scheme, but that the scheme is being revamped and a new date will be announced for its launch. From the presidential villa, Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
Now, in the meantime, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, says the lawmakers will convene a National Legislative Security Summit shortly after the Ramadan fast in order to brainstorm on how to tackle the lingering insecurity challenges bedeviling the nation. The Speaker, who made the disclosure when he led the delegation of the House to Kaduna State to sympathize with the governor over the kidnap of over 200 pupils and students in JSS Kuriga of Chikun local government area, also disclosed that the House will soon commence the process of amending the Constitution for the establishment of state police.
The House of Representatives is going to organize a National Legislative Security Summit immediately after Salah to discuss with all critical stakeholders in the country on ways and means we can be able to come up with measures that will ensure lasting peace in the country. I want to urge His Excellency to please take advantage of this summit that we are going to organize by sending representatives to be there so that we can share the Kaduna State perspective on this insecurity issue.
I want to urge the House of Reps to revisit the issue of state police, because the Right Honorable Speaker have just said that they are right now looking at the Constitution, which we believe collectively the 99 Constitution is really not functional. It needs to be amended, but for me, one of the most important areas that needs to be amended is the issue of security architecture of Nigeria. And for us to achieve that, we must work toward the creation of state police in Nigeria. As we are speaking, the number of the entire military in Nigeria are less than 200,000. And we're a country of over 200 million. For me, I believe we're lacking boots on ground.
As we're talking concerns around security, medical charity organization Médecins Sans Frontières, also known as Doctors Without Borders, is raising alarm over what it describes as a dire humanitarian situation unfolding in Nigeria's northwest geopolitical zone. It highlights the devastating impact of the armed conflict on communities, resulting in catastrophic levels of malnutrition and escalating crisis. The country representative in Nigeria, Dr. Simba Terima, while speaking on our program, The Morning Brief, explains that if interventions don't come as soon as possible, this will degenerate terribly for the people of the region, especially affected families.
Through 2023, MSF witnessed catastrophic levels of malnutrition and persistent outbreaks of preventable diseases in the Northwest. Now, this is 2023. We've been in the Northwest for a long, long time, more than a decade, so to speak, and we continue to witness these issues. But 2023 it really stood out. Communities in the Northwest, including around 600,000 displaced people, are suffering due to extreme violence, deteriorating economic conditions, as everybody knows, as well as, of course, the issues of global climate change. The humanitarian crisis in the Northwest remains largely unrecognized, ignored, and forgotten. We hear harrowing stories from our caregivers who come to our facilities with very severely malnourished children after having walked for miles and hours in insecure places without access to primary healthcare facilities and money for transportation. A total of 854 children died in our facilities, which was within 24 to 48 hours after admission. I have to be pessimistic, I'm sorry. If the help does not come, kids will continue to die. This is the reality. If we don't intervene. You know, the numbers that we give you, if probably we were not present at that moment, right, that 854 number would have been worse. And these are the ones that we've been able to capture. This is our clinical data. We really have no idea what is happening out there. So we have no option but to act, and to act now.
Absolutely clear, to act and act now. The United Nations Children Emergency Fund has pledged to provide educational support for abduction of abducted students and other children that have been distressed by the recent bandit attack in Kuriga community in Chikun local government area of Kaduna State. The UNICEF field officer, that's the chief field officer, Dr. Jerida Birukula, who made the pledge when she visited Governor Obasani to sympathize with him over the incident, also tasked the federal government to beef up security in the community in order to enable safe and secure access to the community for care providers.
The March 8 bandits attack at Kuriga community, where over 200 students of public schools were abducted, has continued to attract both local and international attention. This time, a delegation from the United Nations International Children's Fund, UNICEF, led by the Kaduna Chief Officer, Dr. Jerida Birukila, is at Sir Kashim Ibrahim Government House to see the state governor, Senator Obasani. The visit is first to sympathize with the state government and the families of the kidnapped children, and also to see how UNICEF can support the victims and other children that have been forced out of school in Kuriga community due to the incident.
UNICEF is ready to support you. That's why we have come to hear from you on how we can support. In the past, like I remember in Yobe, when the Dapchi girls were kidnapped, I was involved in the response. We prepared for the time when they were in captivity, the time when they were released, and the time when they went back to the community.
Lamenting the impact of the school abduction on education in Kaduna, Governor Sani promises to partner with UNICEF and other development partners to ensure that the kidnapped children are rescued and back to school.
Education is one of the most important agendas of our government. And that's the reason why we have been very worried and concerned, because that has really brought some level of setback for us, because we have been trying to ensure that we reduce out of school children in Kaduna State. Then attack to our school will certainly have some negative impacts.
The Commandant General of the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps, NSCDC, Ahmed Audi, also led other senior officers of the Corps on a visit to Governor Sani. He informs the governor that the Corps is deploying special guards to vulnerable communities under the Safe Schools initiative.
Of the NSCDC.
And while efforts are ongoing for the Kaduna State government and security agencies to rescue the 287 abducted students and others that were abducted by bandits in Chikun and Kajuru local government areas of the state, it is expected that the protection of schools against further attacks by bandits would be effectively looked into.
We're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll push up this conversation about the insecurity in the country. Join us again. And more stories now. The Minister of the FCT, Mr. Nyesom Wike, believes that security in the nation's capital has improved following the arrest of two notorious kidnappers. Mr. Wike said this after addressing senators in plenary over the security situation in the nation's capital. He promised security and more infrastructure for the residents of the FCT.
After a dramatic plenary culminating in the suspension of the chairman of the Northern Senators Forum, Senator Abdul Ningi, plenary resumes for the second legislative sitting for the week. The Minister of the FCT, Mr. Nyesom Wike, as well as the Police Commissioner, arrives the Senate's chamber to honor a summon to brief on the security situation in the nation's capital. The session holds behind closed doors. Less than 3 hours after, the FCT minister and the police chief state some of the issues discussed and plans to improve security in the nation's capital.
The military has quite improved in FCT. Most of the kidnappings to you here sometimes are state-managed by people. There are some internal arrangements. Mind you, two most wanted notorious kidnappers, we have gotten them. And that's why you see the level of kidnapping has reduced.
Since 1 month and there's no kidnapping in FCT, we have used a lot of intelligence. We have decided to dominate the forests because FCT is bounded by 4 states that are crime-prone.
Meanwhile, Southern senators have met to revive their forum, electing Senator Adetokunbo Abiru, representing Lagos East, as chairman. The inauguration of Senator Abiru, who replaces the Senate leader, Senator Opeyemi Bamidele, as well as the vice chairman, Senator Victor Ume, representing Anambra, comes 9 months after the commencement of the 10th Senate.
The expectation and the responsibility that has been bestowed on us is to champion the cause of Nigeria and Nigerians first and foremost. And of course, again, because we also live in an environment where we also have our northern brothers as well. So what we are meant to do is to also work closely with them in championing the cause of Nigeria.
The coincidence of reviving the Southern Senators Forum 24 hours after the suspension of the chairman of the Northern Senators Forum was palpable.
It has always existed. What we just have now is a change of leadership, because our former leader presently is the leader of the Senate. And of course, we now have a new leadership, and we also will follow in the line of direction that he had given us. So it's a continuity.
The 51 senators from 17 southern states also elected 6 executives under Abiru's chairmanship. From the National Assembly, Gloria Umezuki, Channels Television News.
As you can see from a lot of the stories were brought to your attention, it's all about security or insecurity, which is the proper word. It's a big challenge across the country. Today makes it about a week since those innocent children and students were kidnapped in Kuriga community in Chikun local government area of Kaduna State. We're still waiting. It's about a week. And not to talk of the women who are still in captivity in Borno, with several other incidents in Sokoto and parts of the country, both reported and the ones that are not reported. We're being joined on the program by a legal practitioner to bring perspective to this issue, Mr. Inibe Effiong. Inibe, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Effiong, can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. Thank you for having me. Yes,
all right. If you can hear me, Mr. Effiong, I just needed your take on some of the developments that you're seeing across the country. As a legal practitioner, I'm sure every expertise has their perspective on this issue. Before we have the time to get into some of the nitty-gritty, as much as time will allow, your first impression on how government is managing this situation?
For me, I think it's quite embarrassing that over time we have seen school children being kidnapped without any form of reprieve from government. It appears that children who go to school to study have been left to their fate. Nigerian children are now in a state of complete helplessness. The school is supposed to be a sacred place. It's supposed to be a place for learning. It's supposed to be a sober environment. So to now have so-called bandits and terrorists invade schools on almost a weekly and a monthly basis, hundreds of school children have been kidnapped over the years, and yet the government seems completely lost on how to address this menace. It is embarrassing. It portrays the country as one that has lost control of its territorial sovereignty, and to even imagine that this is happening, this latest kidnap of about 287 school children is happening in Kaduna, the state that had the highest concentration of military formations and facilities in the country. That speaks to the institutional decay. That speaks to lack of leadership. That speaks to a government that doesn't care. And then to have the government come out to say, oh, we are not going to negotiate, we are not going to pay ransom. So what are you going to do? Are you going to leave the school children to be slaughtered? Are you going to leave them to remain at the mercy of their kidnappers? Because I tell you for free, many of these children, their parents don't have the means to pay the ransom. So whatever President Tinubu says, he remains the commander-in-chief, and he has a constitutional obligation to secure the release of those children. And that must be done immediately.
So let's talk about some legal issues here. It appears sometimes legislation is not really as, as potent as it should be. Not because there are no laws. Maybe you can walk us through some of the laws we can look at to ensure that, we make sure everyone can do their job. So, for instance, one of the things people are having as a challenge is the fact that even when these bandits or terrorists or whatever name we want to call them are arrested, we don't see the process, the judicial process, maybe expedited as much as possible or come to a conclusion or a satisfactory conclusion. What can be done so that it serves as a deterrent to some of these people who have made an enterprise out of kidnapping and collecting ransom?
I'm not going to really blame the judiciary quite much for what seems like the lack of justice or the lack of accountability. Because you are not going to have convictions, you are not going to have trials, except these terrorists are arrested, investigated, arraigned in court, and diligently prosecuted. What we have seen, particularly under the last administration of President Buhari, which Tinubu seems to have continued in line with his promise to continue from where Buhari stopped, it appears that the whole thing has been politicized. There seems to be commercialization of the kidnap industry in our country. And it seems that some people in highly placed positions are profiting from what is going on. So if we are going to have trials, if we are going to have convictions, there has to be arrest, there has to be prosecution. But how many prosecutions have we seen? How many of the so-called bandits have we seen being prosecuted? Under the former governor of Kaduna State, because I have to also mention to you that kidnap is basically a state offense. Except they are charged for terrorism, under the law, kidnapping and murder are state offenses. And it is the state that is supposed to prosecute, not necessarily the federal government. But because this is done as a form of terrorism, the federal government under the Terrorism Prevention Act can actually prosecute them at the federal high court. But I was making the point that we had a former governor of Kaduna who came out on record to confess to having had to pay ransom or pay some people to stop kidnapping. Nobody has asked him where he found these people. Nobody had asked them how the money was paid. Now, currently, we see that this thing has persisted. It has persisted because there is now a strong perception that people are profiting, as I said, from this kidnapping that is going on. And this negates the obligation of our country to international covenants and treaties to which Nigeria is a signatory that requires that the third party, the Nigerian state, to protect children. It is also a violation of the Child Rights Act that was passed by the National Assembly. It is also a violation of the Constitution because these children have been denied the right, their lives are being threatened, their liberty has been denied, their movement has been denied, they have been denied parental care and love, they have been denied the right to education. These are rights that the government has a duty to enforce. So I will not put the blame on the judiciary. I will only blame the court if there is evidence that they have been taken to court and then the judges are frustrating the trial. As that today, there is no evidence to show that. The evidence that we see is unwillingness by the government to bring this thing to an end. So this troubles me, and this should trouble every Nigerian. Why should this happen? Did these people not go through checkpoints? How were they able to move freely?
Okay.
To move 280
all right, Nibe,
pupils.
If I may bottom, but sincere apologies. We're totally out of time. We apologize we kept you waiting, but we're totally out of time. It's an ongoing conversation. We will not stop talking about this until we see action from everyone concerned. Nibe Effiong is a legal practitioner joining us there. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Well, just moments ago before we came on air, the Honorable Minister for the FCT has been responding to journalists in the media of Harley on some of the things that he's been doing since he assumed office. And of course, yesterday was at the chambers of the Senate to respond to questions in a closed-door session about security challenges in the FCT, as well as other sundry issues. Let's take a listen to him.
Last year, we applied to the Bureau of Public Procurement. Look, we want to have vehicles to launch by December. and other communication gadgets, allow us to have emergency procurement. They refuse. I'm not saying that not doing that was what led to some of those kidnapping, or what led to the kidnapping of the families and the rest. But if we had had this opportunity to launch Republic, not Republic, that alone puts here before the criminals that look, these people are
some sort of a step.
Yes. But it was when it happened in January, I have to run to Mr. President, look, we can continue. As soon as the President gave us emergency procurement approval immediately that we must get this equipment. And which we have done. Then the only snap we now have, again, I have said, in terms of security, we don't need to bring bureaucracy. We have now applied to the Office of National Security Advisor to allow us to have end-user certificates of most of those equipment. When I appeared before the Senate yesterday, a closed-door session, and I briefed them. They were all happy with what we have done. We agree that kidnappings take place. But the most kidnappings, too, are inside house kidnapping. You cannot run away from it. And two, you may not agree, but some people have this habit that, look, let's make it uncomfortable for the government. I can tell you that. Let's make it uncomfortable. Let the government have problems. Let us see that. Even when something happens, but not to the extent that it happened, their business is to blow it above what happened here.
Oh, that's Minister of the FCT just moments ago during that media parley. And that's it of the program. Thank you so much for your time and company. But on our DSTV platform, we'll be switching gears and crossing over to Anambra State in Awka for the commissioning of Amansia and Anwa of Family Road by the state government. So stay with us on DSTV. That live program will be coming on while we'll continue regular programming on our other platforms. Thank you for watching.